Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and after the turnaround in Barcelona, Mercedes are once again confident they have a car, the W13, capable of potentially winning both World Championships this year. Certainly a long and upward road ahead of them. They're also not particularly confident that Monaco's going to go too well for their car this weekend, but very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Really upset the channel. First of all, from Kimi Räikkönen, of course, retiring from Formula 1 last year. His kind of Instagram bio has been retired since then, but he's racing again officially. He's actually moving to NASCAR, so at least well, going to do some stuff over there. So thought that was kind of cool. Kimi just can't stay away from racing, it seems. There was also this going on, I don't know if you guys saw this about Bernie Eccleston. He was absolutely well and out of control in Brazil, taking Is That Glock to an absolutely new meaning, no doubt. But yeah, this is kind of crazy stuff. This just real quick as well before we talk about what Ferrari are planning to do this weekend in Monaco. But a big discussion point in the last few weeks really has been the idea that really sustainability in F1 doesn't necessarily seem to be the number one priority, let's say. The idea that the races often flip-flop, they go from Europe to the US, then back to Europe, then to Asia, back to Europe, to the US, all this type of stuff without doing kind of tours of the regions, which might make a bit more sense, is a bit of a question mark. Now, the plan is, from the F1 boss, to effectively try and group races a bit more by region. The rumor has it there's going to be like 2 trips to the US and 2 trips to Asia each year, rather than keep going back and forth the whole time, which, does, of course, make more sense. There's things for them to figure out in terms of dates and times and which tracks are even going to be considered, because right now, it's certainly looking like the French Grand Prix and even Spa, the Belgian Grand Prix, could be out the door for various reasons, which is, of course, rather unfortunate in the case of Spa at least. But yeah, they're going to try and kind of group races a bit more in future seasons, which probably is a sensible move, all things considered. Now, of course, we've got to talk about Monaco this weekend. I mean, Charles Leclerc, of course, from Monaco, ideally he's going to win this race. The car probably suits this track better than the Red Bull does. It should be a beneficial weekend for him. Whether he can actually translate that into reality, of course, is a very different story. This past weekend, a victory in Barcelona, as it looked like it was going to be, would have been massive for them, but of course the DNF has hurt their standings very badly indeed, and Red Bull are just lapping up the points lately. The Mercedes and Ferrari will both have to claw back on over these coming races. Charles Leclerc, of course, is bad luck in Monaco. Will it continue this weekend? That, of course, is the question, but apparently they're actually trying, at least for now, potentially in practice tomorrow. They might bring the new upgrades for tomorrow, whatever they were using back in Spain, but apparently the old aerodynamic package on the floor is actually being used right now, because possibly this new aero package they're using in Spain reduces the porpoising, but maybe on a track like Monaco, where straight line speed isn't much of a big deal, that you might prefer this older model because it may have higher drag, right, which is a possibility. They're kind of trying out the new maximum load wing as well, because absolutely every single bit of downforce you can extract from the car is what you need around Monaco. So they might try and do some sort of comparison between the two floors that they have. This kind of is the older one, and then the newer one they were using in Spain, because that pretty much, that package, they reckon gained them about 0.3 of a second, which put them on par with, if not slightly faster than Red Bull at the Spanish Grand Prix, which of course is certainly where they need to be for the rest of the year. And this should be, theoretically, a track that suits them compared to the Red Bull, and probably compared to the Mercedes as well. We'll see that here in a second. Other cars, though, could also be good around here. The Alfa Romeo maybe will be one of them. We'll see that in a few minutes' time. The rumour had it also that they were going to go back to the first power unit for Monaco. That seemingly is still the case, although Amos reported early on that actually they were going to use the third power unit, which would have been a strange decision given the fact that they only get 3 for the season until they want to take penalties. So probably they want to save the third one for as late as they possibly can, because probably they're going to have to take a penalty anyway, with the fact that some of the parts in the second power unit were damaged this past weekend in Barcelona. And yeah, apparently they're not going to switch to PU3, they're going to go back to PU1 or the second power unit with kind of a used MGU-H and TC. That could be in the turbocharger, the 2 parts that were damaged, of course, last weekend. So using maybe the power unit 1's version of these parts. Not sure what they're going to do, but yeah, we'll find out over the coming days. Let's talk Mercedes then, right? So of course, Monaco has generally been a track where Mercedes and Hamilton have not necessarily had all that much success compared to some other ones. The car hasn't really suited this track in previous years compared to, well, some of the faster corners, let's just say. However, at the start of the season, with the older and obviously weaker aero package, they were probably the fastest car on the grid in the slower speed corners. In Bahrain, for example, at the start of the season, they were the quickest car in the slower speed corners, but suffered heavily on the straights and the faster corners due to the porpoising thing. So maybe it's a similar thing for them, where the new package has actually hurt them in the slower corners, and they might want to think about what they do this weekend, right? Because of course Monaco is full of the slower speed corners, and they were certainly suffering in Sector 3, slower speed sector at Spain, but they were gaining a lot in Sector 1 especially, which of course is faster speed. So definitely, that's kind of more traditional Mercedes, but does it affect them around Monaco? That of course is another question. But still, after their performance in Spain, of course, Monaco is just one race. There's been a lot of, optimism from the Mercedes camp that they could potentially still fight for championships this year. This is another ongoing storyline actually going into this weekend, because the whole Hamilton versus the FIA jewellery regulation, there's certainly a bit of strong arming going on right here, and the FIA could potentially say this weekend that Hamilton isn't allowed to race, because they gave him that 2-race exemption to remove the piercings or whatever, and he said, look, I'm not doing it, because I think he effectively was making the point that if people have wedding rings and stuff, they can still wear those, even even though like some people say you can, some people will say you can't, not really sure what's going on there. And Hamilton's like, look, and even Vettel kind of agreed with Hamilton that it feels like the FIA are targeting him specifically. Whether that's the case or not, it feels like kind of a fruitless exercise, but yeah, definitely a story to keep your eyes on over the coming weekends. Now McLaren, of course, they reckon that of course last year they managed to take a podium, but Seidel's cautiously optimistic about their potential given the fact that they struggled a lot with slow speed last year and still managed to have a decent result. And also saying that we don't really think Monaco suits our car, the McLaren, but of course they struggled pretty bad this past weekend as well, even though in fairness, if Norris was 100% healthy, he might have had an even better race than he already did. But look, Mercedes, of course, in Spain, they made a significant step. They probably halved the deficit, if not even more than that, to their top rivals in Red Bull and, of course, Ferrari as it is at the present time. But there was a period during that race where Lewis Hamilton was the fastest man on the track. Of course, there were some other factors in play, but certainly that we've not seen anywhere like that from Mercedes so far this season. And Toto Wolff even said, compared to what he's seen in previous years, that this looked like a world championship winning car. Of course, Hamilton had that difficult start, drops all the way to the back of the grid, and of course, Toto Wolff has seen this before, right? When Hamilton, for example, last year in Brazil, he has to start from the back of the grid in the sprint race, works his way up, and then does the same thing through the race, in the actual race itself, through the field. And as he says, that looked like a world championship winning race car he was driving, and I'm not sure that would have been possible in the previous races. That reminded me of last year and the years before, when the car is really on top of its game. I've seen a race car today that reminded me of the race cars from previous seasons, where you're 30 plus seconds behind the whole field, you come all the way back to the front and near the podium. That is very encouraging and shows that we have made another step. Can we fight for a world championship? Well, we bet that we can, but we just need to have a car that's able to finish first and second, and I think we have reasons to believe that we can get there. So that's the thing, really. This season has been topsy-turvy already. After the first 3 races, it felt like, okay, wow, Ferrari are just going to run away with this championship. 3 races later, and people are saying the same thing about Red Bull. So things can change very quickly. He admits that, look, the odds are against us, but motor racing is a different ballgame. We've seen today that Ferrari didn't score a lot of points, although they should have done. We're absolutely pushing flat out in order to bring us back into the game, and that's the thing, like, there is a significant deficit. Hamilton is 64 points adrift of championship leader Max Verstappen. That is significant, right? But it only really takes a couple of DNFs for Verstappen more than Hamilton. Like, let's say Hamilton magically just has a car that's as good as the Red Bull, a couple of DNFs of Verstappen, like a Hamilton wins a few races here or there, like you do close that gap, right? We saw a massive gap really of 40 or so points, I think it was, almost between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. That's been overturned within just 3 races, right? So it just does go to show what is possible, right? And even Russell is actually much closer, right? Russell's only 36 points behind. So if all of a sudden they have a championship winning car, which I don't think they're quite there yet, where they believe they have the possibility to do that, then they're not actually like too far adrift that you might think they would be, given the fact that their car at the start of the year certainly left a lot to be desired, right? And in constructors, they're in 3rd place on 120, 75 adrift of Red Bull, 49 behind Ferrari. So it's not like an incredible deficit to overturn. Like this is a quite significant deficit. We kind of thought at the start of the season, like, look, Mercedes just got to pick up every single point they possibly can in these races to make sure that by the time they fix their car and it's going to potentially compete for race wins, they can be close enough to potentially close the gap. Hamilton said quite early on in the season, pretty sure it was after Imola probably, that he was like, look, the championship is over. There's no way I'm going to be able to fight for it this season. And it still looks very unlikely that Hamilton can overturn this deficit. But at this point, you probably can't rule absolutely everything out. And Hamilton was very happy this weekend, very excited, very willing to push on and do better. And he had some positive words to say, as of course he always does, about how he really enjoyed this weekend, and it really showed him why he loves this sport so much. And this actually I thought was interesting from F1pace.com. But just look at the kind of pace over the course of the race between, if we look at the averages here, Hamilton's a little bit behind where Verstappen was, a 1:27.8 compared to a 1:27.5. But if we just look at kind of the curve right here actually between Verstappen and Hamilton, like it's a very similar kind of array of lap times, to be honest, between the two cars. And Russell, of course, is not too far behind either. And the two Ferraris back here, of course, Sainz kind of picked up that issue, which is unfortunate for him. And in fairness, Spain has been a track that suited Mercedes in previous years. Most certainly, Hamilton won the last 5 Grand Prix in Spain in a row before this one, of course, that Verstappen took the victory at. But just does show that Mercedes were not closer now than, of course, they have been recently. Now, look, whether they can overturn the deficit, that is another question entirely. Like in the last 3 rounds, Mercedes have scored 55 points, Scuderia Ferrari has scored 65, and Red Bull have scored 140, which is obviously monstrous. And we'll look to continue that trend in Monaco, but it's far from guaranteed they're going to be able to do so, right? As kind of Wolff says right here, it's possible that in the past, Monaco hasn't really been their most, happy race, and it's possible this year is a similar story. He actually says right here that in the past, our car was effectively the size of an elephant. I'm curious to see where we are this weekend. We still struggle a bit with warm-up, right? That was one of the things that maybe takes away a little bit from the progress Mercedes made, is that, it was scorching hot in Spain. Their kind of tyre warm-up issues that they seemingly have had so far this season went away in Spain, and of course it also went away on Miami on that Friday because, the track is just so hot, it's not a problem, right, to warm up your tyres. But it was a massive issue for them in Imola, especially in qualifying, right? So maybe that's going to be a key issue, especially if it's a little bit colder, or let's say raining on Sunday than it usually would be. Therefore, they're going to have to think about that an awful lot. And especially looking at this stage, I thought it was really interesting looking at the final chicane, I believe, in the race between teams. So the fastest car through the final chicane in Spain was none other than the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, right, because Zhou went out early in the race. But, Ferrari, Red Bull right behind, McLaren right there, Haas right there, Mercedes about 2/10 lost to Bottas in the Alfa Romeo just in that final chicane alone. Just going to Red Bull, Ferrari seemingly pretty closely fought in that kind of zone as well, but potentially showing that on the current setup, the Mercedes doesn't really have what it takes in those slower speed corners like they did at the start of the season since their aero changes, which of course have benefited them overall, but might hurt them around Monaco, right? So they're going to have to think about that. Ferrari are probably favourites coming into this weekend again, but Charles Leclerc, can he last all the laps in Monaco? That's another question entirely. And just to finish out with this one, right, because whoever starts P20 this weekend may well be favoured to score some points. Doubt that's going to happen around a circuit like Monaco, but it's at least possible. The last 3 races, the driver that started P20 and, well, Alex Albon, of course, Ocon and Alonso respectively, have all finished somewhere in the points. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.